will now go on to introduce the next speaker, which is Mr. Tomás Gabriel García-Micó. He is a PhD in law candidate and a teaching assistant at Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, Spain, where he's researching the substantive, procedural, and regulatory implications of new surgical technologies, in particular surgical robots. Aside from the research of his PhD, Tomás Gabriel García-Micó took the initial training in university teaching, a course of 170 hours in teaching innovation. Wow, that's really interesting. I wish I had such a course. Since then, he was deeply interested in the research on this topic. He's also a practicing lawyer, and he was working with 3 years in one of the biggest Spanish law firms, Uría Menéndez. So we will now hear Mr. Tomás Gabriel García-Micó.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tomás Gabriel García-Micó, and along with my colleague Ignacio García Perrote Martínez, both of us PhD researchers and teacher assistants at Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, we are going to present our paper titled Teaching in Unsettled Times, Experiences of Online Teaching for On-Site Studies. Well, the objective of this presentation is, as you can see, exposing two different realities, two different teaching realities that had been held during the COVID-19 pandemic. The main point is that Universitat Pompeu Fabra is a university that provides on-site teaching. So we are not used to provide online studies or virtual teaching, okay? The next one is assessing how two different criteria, components of teaching can be or have been tried to be achieved through all virtual teaching, which are complete teaching, completeness, to provide the same degree of quality of teaching to students in comparison with on-site teaching, and how to accompany studentship with this new teaching paradigm. It is relevant to know that these two realities are the main foundations of teaching. How can we provide a complete teaching experience? And at the same time, how can we accompany students without on-site, without in-person interaction? And we're going to present our main ideas, our main considerations, as well as some preliminary results of some questionnaires that had been distributed through students to know their opinion. The experiences that will be presented in this presentation are two. The first one is a course called Introduction to Business Law. This course is done in the first year of the degree of Economics or Business Management, and both my colleague and me have done tutorials, so classes in little groups, normally practical classes that when done on site have the objective of discussing cases and providing the practical insight of the reality of the theoretical reality that is being presented in class. These students are not interested in law because they are doing this economics and business management. So normally, and as we have seen, they have more difficulties than other students, than law students, of course, because they're not used to the rhythm of study that in law we require. The second course is Introduction to Common Law. This course has been done by me, and is a third year of the degree of law course. And in this case, I will present both lectures and tutorials. So how can we reach completeness, achieve completeness? Well, as we've seen, I've defined, the objective of completeness is to provide the same quality of teaching than if the teaching was on site. This is the big difference. And we're going to present the two experiences. In tutorials, we've tried to exploit self-path learning. So students through cases, through real cases that any lawyer can find in reality, can see how the law is applied in the reality. Given that they are students of economics, they're going to deal with the economic reality. They are going to probably manage companies or work as auditors, or they would have to see the reality, and this is a way of seeing how the law is applied in the theory. At the same time, we are going to present lectures that have been done through an application called Collaborate, which is about video conference system used by Universitat Pompeu Fabra. Well, in tutorials, so we are going to focus on tutorials. We can see we've put an example of one of our Moodle courses. For instance, here you can see, I'm going to provide the translation. There's a notice board. Okay, this is the principle, the main page of the course. And I uploaded a notice board where I normally communicate to students everything that happens and that has relational with the course. And also the assessment criteria in a video made by myself. I presented a video with the assessment criteria in PDF, and I explained the most relevant parts of the assessment criteria of tutorials. And this would be an example of a Moodle course, but with the exercises we've been dealing with. Normally, what you can find in these Moodle courses in this case, Introduction to Business Law, was a forum where students can post their doubts about the first tutorial or about the tutorial at hand. Then the cases, which were the reflex of the reality of a real case made by the colleagues of the course, with brief instructions attached to it. For instance, in this case, we made the students know that these tutorials were not mandatory. Given the circumstances we were living, we considered that the best way of providing self-taught learning was to make them with knowing which were the materials, because they were informed about which material was relevant to prepare that class. They were able to use these materials, and if they had any doubt, they could use these forums. And also, they had an end date, in this case, to deliver the cases that could be solved individually or in group. Also, the presentation of the class or some notes of the class, the solutions to the cases that were uploaded, of course, after the deadline for the delivery of the cases, and when doubts were presented, a compilation of doubts. And these were uploaded to all courses. I mean, even if the doubt was presented in one of the subgroups, all of them had access to the answers in order to grant fairness and completeness too. Well, we knew that, or we suspected that normally when we are dealing with voluntary works, students may not have the incentives to do that. In this case, the incentive was that they could get 0.5 points more of extra grade if the work was delivered, and of course the work was of quality, was well prepared, because we couldn't provide any kind of extra points if it was just it was a legal analysis of the cases. So we were well and quite surprised about the results, because I've taken here my students, which were 89, okay, and we can see the rates of participation of delivery of each voluntary work. As you can see in tutorial 1, it was the one with the less participation. In this case, 31 students delivered the practical cases solved, which represents the 34.83% of students. And the other tutorials were quite good. In fact, in the second tutorial, we reached more than the half of the class, 46 students. Tutorial 3 and 4 were nearly the 50%, 45% and 47%. And the fifth tutorial, which we can understand pretty well that students that were less students eager to participate in this tutorial, because it was the one close to the assessment, to the exam of tutorials. So they had to study, and therefore it's quite understandable that there was a lower participation, but nonetheless, it's not a bad participation. It's 41.57%. So the average of participation is that for 39.2 students made the voluntary works all along the course, which represents the 44%, which is a really good data of participation. So as we said, students normally were left to deliver the cases between Friday or Monday at 9 a.m. in the morning. In this case, when the cases were delivered on Monday, they had the solutions the same day. In fact, when the deadline was fulfilled, we uploaded the solutions, and they were provided with 24 hours to submit their doubts to the solutions through the model. Of course, they could use this forum to participate in any doubt they could have at any point. But during the course, we found that only 2 doubts were submitted all along the course in the 5 tutorials, which presents worrisome data that maybe students were not eager to participate. About lectures. Now we've seen the experience in tutorials, now in lectures of Introduction to Common Law. In lectures, normally, or many people has the idea that tutorials is where the theory is explained to students. So it's a teacher-oriented experience. In this course, I try to provide another insight. I try to provide an insight of nearly an American classroom in which the student has the main paper. Is the main actor of the class, and trying to build the class along with the students. For this reason, normally I provide materials to students, and here you can see the example of the model of lectures of Introduction to Common Law. I provided a syllabus for my section because it is a course that has 3 sections. The first one, which is worth the 20% of the grade, is 2 weeks of history of law, history of common law. The second section has the 20% also of the grade, and is done by a professor of King's College London, Dr. Manuel Panadas, and is about contract law in common law countries. And section 3, which is the section I've been dealing with in one of the 4 groups we have, is about product liability law, which is my specialization in my dissertation, in my research, and is the 50% of the grade, is the 60% of the grade. 10% of tutorials, which were substituted, as you can see here, were substituted by a guided written assignment. So they had the possibility of requesting meetings through the preparation of the written assignment, and the 50% of the final exam. In this case, I provided the syllabus of this 60% of the grade, and you can see an example of one of the lessons. Normally, I used, as you can see here, the link to the Collaborate, where you can see lesson 1, and they could connect there and participate. Normally, the rate of students present at class were around the 50, 60%, 70%, which is really good given the circumstances. The mandatory lectures and slides or notes that they could read beforehand. The lectures, that's why I consider that it was interesting to provide enough material for students to have the ability of discussing the theory, and not being a class in which the teacher is during an hour and a half explaining or saying what he thinks. And I provide these materials normally 1 week before the class, for they having the time to read them, to comprehend them, and being able to discuss them in class. And the results were really good. This student-guided teaching was really good. I had a really high percentage of participation in class, both through the chat, and some students were brave enough to open their microphones and to speak to all the class before or in front of their team, colleague, and classmates to discuss a case, to provide the facts, an analysis of the facts, which were the solutions that the court considered, because this course, given that it's a common law course, is guided through the cases. So they had to comprehend the cases, and that's why I provide them these materials. These classes, of course, were recorded, both given live and also recorded for these students providing essential services during the COVID-19 pandemic, given that they were unable to attend classes because it was normally 8:30 a.m. in the morning or 10:30. And tutorials were substituted. So normally they are mandatory assistance, but I consider that given the circumstances of the pandemic, establishing a mandatory assistance or attendance system was not fair. So I substituted with a guided written assignment whose results were pretty good, I have to say. And brief notes about the accompaniment. How can we accompany students during this situation, not making them feel alone in their teaching, in the learning path? We do it through two means. Notice boards. Every course has these notice boards I said before, these forums where they can upload doubts, and normally is the way in which professors address a student. So every new related to the course was published there and therefore sent to their students' email. Normally materials, calendars of delivery of activities, results, grades, etc. is provided there. And in this case, we have tried to, me and my colleague, Ignacio García Perrote, we tried to answer every email we received the same day and in no more than an hour since the reception. Normally, those mails which were more complex in content required more time to prepare them, but normally they were answered within the hour. And of course, with in a general rule, answers or emails received after 10 p.m. were answered the next day. But given that we have been working even some nights and a huge number of nights during this situation, some mails were even answered at 11 p.m. or even at 12 a.m. in the morning, depending on the day. So we are going to present some, and this is the last part of this course. We have asked the students of International Business Economics, Introduction to Business Economics, or Introduction to Business Law, to give their insight, their feedback about them. Given that those students who uploaded in this course of economics, their solutions to the cases were provided with individual feedback about what they were doing correctly or what should be modified in order to improve, we have asked the same to students to do that with us. So we try to focus our questionnaires around questions related to this presentation, and we have some preliminary results. Of course, in the final article that we are going to prepare through the summer, we will be able to present the results of all courses: Introduction to Common Law, Introduction to Business Law, as well as a course that my colleague is doing, which is Foundations of Private Law. So we are going to present the results. Normally they're in a scale of 1 to 5, being 1 the less and 5 the best quality or the best assessment. Here you can find the first question. Being 1 non-adequate and 5 completely adequate, assess please how the tutorial's organization matched your expectations. As you can see, groups were quite different, and we have to be real. 2 subgroups, the subgroup 102 and 402, consider that we failed in the organization of seminars, or they did not match their expectations. So we have an average of 2.75, which is a short passing grade, but not enough. Of course, we are learning from that, and we will improve, or we will try to improve with that in order to avoid this to happen again. The second question is, being 1 not difficult and 5 too difficult, assess please the degree of difficulty of the cases. As you can see, the average is a 3.55, which means that they consider the cases quite difficult but not excessively difficult. The third question, being 1 useless and 5 useful, assess please the utility of the system of publication of answers of the cases with the possibility of doing an online class if doubt existed. The normal rule is where if in these forums we had enough number of questions, we would summon the students to online class, and if they don't, we would just publish the results. And we were asking about this, if they consider better this system we put. And as you can see, the average rate is a 3.43. So the majority of students consider that this system was mostly useful. The fifth question, and I know that I forgot about the fourth question, but it was a question requiring students to provide their feedback about something, written feedback, and we'll provide an analysis of these results. But the fifth question was, being 1 low and 5 high, assess please your degree of use of the course, or in other terms, how much have you learned? As we can see, the average is 3.07, which is a good result, but not enough. 6, being 1 low and 5 high, assess please the utility of individual feedback reports that we've been talking about before. The average, we can see that there's one subgroup 103, and subgroup 401 and 102 that consider that there was a 3.84. So they were really high, really useful. The average is 3.4. Being 1 low and 5 high, please assess the degree of attention of professors, in this case us, to students' needs regarding the time of response. We can say the results are not bad. It's a 3.58 of average, having 3 groups, 101, 401, and 402, with results close to the 4 or equal to 4. The 8th question, being 1 low and 5 high, assess please the degree of attention of professors to students' needs regarding the content of the answers. We can see that the average is 3.55 with a couple of groups, 101 and 401, close or equal to 4, which is a good result in this case. The 9th question, being 1 low and 5 high, please assess the degree of attention of professors to students' needs, the utility of answers. We have an average of 347 in 2 subgroups, 103, 401, 3.7, and in other one, the 101, 3.6. And the 10th question, being 1 low and 5 high, assess please the degree of information you have received from an organizational point of view by professors. We have an average of 2.93. Okay. And we had a last question, the 11th, which was, what can we improve? But here the answers sometimes were quite long. But the fourth question was interesting. Do you think it would be better having virtual sessions rather than or instead of having the answers to the cases? Here we can see that we are quite happy with the results. We have distinguished the opinions between positive, neutral, and negative. Negative were comments quite harsh, but that we have to take into account because they prove that there are students who are not happy with the system or that have not been satisfied with the system. And of course, comments about the final exam, which has nothing to do with the organizational system of tutorials, but we put them in negative. Neutral are comments that are yes or no, and a justification that this could be done better. They're not critiques, they are observations to improve. And positive, okay? We have that 26 of these comments were positive, 15 were neutral, and 6 were negative. Of course, in the final article, and given the short time we have for the presentation, I cannot present the answers, but they will be analyzed in the final article that we hope to present after the summer. So this is our presentation, my presentation about the article Teaching Unsettled Times. I hope to receive your feedback, and of course, I'm at your disposal to answer your questions here live and also through email after the conference, which is tomasgabriel.garcia@upf.edu. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas. Actually, I would like to ask you something. Why did you decide to make the tutorials voluntary and not to require them to submit at least some of them? And second question is, you showed about 50% participation of students, but do you know if it's the same 50% or there were some students who, you know, what is your coverage? Did you reach 100% of coverage of the students, that at least everyone at least submitted one question, one tutorial? Is that something that you know?
Well, I cannot turn my camera, but I will answer by voice. About the first question, we have these 5 tutorials which were not mandatory, and the students were provided this feedback, and we have 2 assessment tests. One during the 3rd tutorial, there was a mandatory assignment, and another one in the 5th one. And these 5 non-mandatory materials or assessments were just to get an extra. And about your second question, we have had many students who haven't participated, and normally there were the same students, the ones uploading the assessment. So we are happy because we have a high percentage of students, but at the same time we must make some critique and trying to search the reasons why these other important group of students did not participate.
Thank you, Thomas.